You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy, Ott and Paul Stone, week 0. The appetizers out the way, although it's a little bit more tasty than we thought. I mean, what about some game? Way more competitive. The Dogs in the Division I games, 4-0, and it wasn't much of a sweat. All right, let's get to the high-profile games, the big ones. It's a considerable drop-off from the top 5 to everybody else. Penn State, a rematch of last year's game. They go to Morgantown, West Virginia, 8-51.5. Last year's a James Franklin special, Paul, where he could have kneeled the ball. Time runs out. He pushes it in, and he's done that from time to time at Penn State. So don't pay attention to what he says. He knows the point spread and will cover if he has go out of his way to cover if he has a chance. Neil Brown under a lot of hot water last year goes 9-4, and man, he's got his quarterback back. Aller is back for Penn State, but has he improved any bit from last year? They did not trust him last year. Just look at the play calling. Didn't trust him. Penn State would have been in a 12-team playoff several years over the last few years under James Franklin, and now they've expanded it, and a lot of people are looking them to get into the field of 12 this year. Penn State 8-51.5, Paul, in its rematch game in Morgantown.
Yeah, this game, even a few weeks back, was a double-digit point spread with, of course, Penn State favored, so some money has arrived on West Virginia. This series actually resumed last year after a 31-year break, and as you mentioned, James Franklin and the Nittany Lions score on a 5-yard run with 6 seconds to go. They were leading by 16 points, but of course they closed as a 20.5-point favorite, so James Franklin gets the money. First time this game has been in Morgantown since 1992. Penn State's dominated this series, 49-9-2, 33-2 in the last 35. This West Virginia team last year, they win 9 games. They defeated 7 FBS teams in the regular season. And of the 7 FBS teams that they defeated in the regular season, none of those 7 teams finished the regular season with a winning record. So they kind of beat up on the teams they were kind of mostly supposed to beat. So they really haven't beaten a team of Penn State's stature last season anyway. And the Nittany Lions 7-0 against the spread the last 2 years as an away favorite. But with all that said, I like West Virginia here. It's a situation where they've got a quarterback who's a dual-threat guy just a bulldog of a quarterback, one of my favorite players in all of college football, Garrett Green. He's a guy who threw for 2,406 yards last year, only completed 53% of his passes, but the Mountaineers throw the ball downfield. They actually average 8.7 yards per attempt, Green did, so a very high yards per attempt average there. In addition to the 2,400 passing yards, he ran the ball for 772 yards, accounted for 29 touchdowns. So I think West Virginia, this is a big game there in Morgantown. Starts early, so if West Virginia pulls off the upset, there's going to be a lot of furniture probably going to ruins. I like West Virginia plus the 8 points over Penn State.
Double dose of West Virginia here. I like West Virginia plus the 8 as well. We had a better line available at 10, but some sharp action on the Mountaineers here. I'll even go as far as this. I think this game is going to decide whether or not Penn State gets into the playoff. They lose here. I just don't see them. They have taken care of the teams they're supposed to win, and they've had a hard time competing against Ohio State and Michigan. And so this would be a tough one. And Neil Brown did it over time at Troy, and he had a lot of respect. And it was very close to being fired, but went 9-4 last year. This team has the potential, and I think they will be, especially with returning quarterback, starting quarterback. This is going to be his best team. They have a decent offensive line. They've got some guys, some weapons for him to go to. And after trying to bring in quarterback after quarterback, JT Daniels 1 year didn't work out as well. I think he's got his best team, and that is a tough place to play. Noon Eastern time kickoff. Maybe I'd like a little bit later to let those people, but trust me, in West Virginia, people going to get nice and full before that noon kickoff in Morgantown, and it's rekindling an old traditional rivalry of these neighboring states. So we're a little double dose of West Virginia plus the points there. A&M and Notre Dame, boy. Here's the $1 million. Texas A&M 346.5. We talked about Texas A&M's schedule. They got a lot of tough teams at home, the weaker teams on the road, which makes a lot of 50-50 games. Really entertaining schedule for Elko in his first year. Of course, he was a defensive coordinator for a while at Notre Dame. But is Notre Dame that good, or is it Notre Dame because their schedule that favorable? I can look at this. No Michigan State, Stanford's weak, USC's not up to their normal level. Army and Navy are down. They're playing 2 MAC teams. I mean, we go on it. Virginia. This is the weakest schedule I have seen of the Fighting Irish in my 58 years of living. I don't know about you, Paul, but it's a tough one, though. You know Kyle Fields is going to be amped up. Going to be a great atmosphere. 346.5. Not my favorite game to pick. This line was softer earlier. It was right around Pickett or 1, but now Notre Dame catching 3. So some money early on A&M at home here.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with you. Penn State's got to hold serve. They can't lose to West Virginia and make the playoff. And I think Notre Dame, based on the schedule that you just went over, they got to go 11-1 in the regular season to make the playoffs. I think 10-2, they are really relying on some help, and I think that schedule might come back and bite them. First of all, looking at their personnel, they were already replacing 2 offensive tackles who were big-time players. Left tackle Joe Alt was the 5th overall pick in last spring's NFL draft. Blake Fisher, the right tackle, he was a 2nd-round pick. And then in one of the biggest injuries in summer camp, their left tackle, redshirt freshman Charles Jagasaw, a guy with a big-time reputation. They had already kind of anointed him as their best offensive lineman. He goes down with injury. He's lost for the season, and now they're really having to shuffle that offensive line. It's definitely a question mark, but I still lean to the Irish here +3. I love the addition of Duke transfer quarterback Riley Leonard. I think he's an upgrade over last year's starter Sam Hartman. They have a lot of experienced talent on defense. Howard Cross, the nose guard, a first-team All-America last year. Their cornerback Benjamin Morrison, considered one of the best cover guys in all of college football. You look at the A&M, they obviously paid off Jimbo Fisher, and now they bring in former Aggie defensive coordinator, who was most recently Duke's head coach, Mike Elko. They brought in Elko after flirting with Kentucky's Mark Stoops and perhaps a few others, so he wasn't their first choice, but all the returns so far are positive on Elko. Of course, they have yet to play a game, so talking time is about to turn into playing time there in College Station. Marcus Freeman, a small sample size, but he's been good as an underdog, 5-1-1 against the spread as a betting underdog. I like the Irish +3 small. Not one of my favorite plays, but a small position now that the line's up to 3 on Notre Dame plus the points.
Paul Stone, I'll buy you a beer anytime, but we putting a beer on this one. If the Irish go 10-2, I got them getting into the playoff. This just in, they have a little bit of politics involved in this college football game, just a little. So, a little side bet for me and Paul on that 10-2, whether the Irish get into this 12-team playoff. But that schedule is a joke. Hey, look, man. I mean, in this where programs are raising $200 million to try and cover just to be a part of a conference. One team stands alone as they prosper as an independent. So that'll be the Fighting Irish. All right, let's get to the one in Las Vegas I will be at, and that is LSU and USC. This was at 6.5 for quite some time. And then a service released the USC Trojans plus the points. It's now at 4.5 and 63. So lots of offense in this one. Expected 30,000 LSU fans will be making a trip, so they will definitely make their presence known. So Tigers, 4.5 and 63 in Las Vegas.
Yeah, both these teams, this is pretty unique. I'm not the greatest historian when it comes to these types of things, but I wonder if 2 teams have ever played in a season opener who are replacing back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners. So that's really unique. Obviously, Jaden Daniels won the award last year for LSU. The year before that, I believe, Caleb Williams at Southern Cal. So both these teams breaking in first-time starters at quarterback, and neither, frankly, in my opinion, are proven at this level. First of all, for LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, he has patiently waited his turn. He has seen some game action. He's thrown over 200 collegiate passes. But Nussmeier, he has a completion rate of just 59%. And that is really, really low for college football. And again, that's across more than 200 attempts. He's not a runner. So the jury's still out on Nussmeier, in my opinion. Then on the other sideline, I think everybody anticipated Southern Cal would be going into the portal to find Caleb Williams' successor. And then we had the bowl game, and Miller Moss throws for 372 yards and 6 touchdowns in the Southern Cal's 33-23 victory over Louisville. So Miller Moss, his reputation's built on one game, so he hasn't consistently done it game after game. This game last year, not that it really matters too much today, but with Williams and Daniels at quarterback, this total would have been in the, probably 72 or 73. Today it's in the low 60s. Both these teams, they bring in new coordinators on defense in an effort to fix, if you will, ailing defenses. LSU reportedly pays Missouri defensive coordinator Blake Baker $2.5 million a year. He's the highest paid assistant in college football by all accounts. And then Southern Cal lures DeAnton Lynn from crosstown rival UCLA. He's the son of former NFLer Anthony Lynn. So it'll be interesting to see what those guys can do with those defenses, which have been a little bit vulnerable, to say the least, the last couple of years. Line currently 4.5 there at Bet Rivers. I'm not interested in laying 4.5, but if it drops to 4, I'll take a small position with LSU. They've burned me the last couple of years in season openers against Florida State. I backed the Bayou Bengals in both of those. But that SEC pedigree, still kind of stands out. So if it drops to 4, I'll take LSU at 4.5. I'll be on the sideline.
I'm on the over. 63 in this one, and I generally don't take overs in the first game in the college football season, where the offenses have some kinks to work out. But is LSU going to be as good as they were on offense last year when they had the highest yards per play in all of college football? It's hard to be, but they're still going to be damn good. Tackles, both of the tackles will go in the first round in the NFL draft, and Will Campbell and Emory Jones. This is their third year starting. And Nussmeier was more of a gunslinger, a risk taker when he got some time early. You saw a more polished, more disciplined player in his first start in the bowl game against Wisconsin, and he drove them on the game-winning drive, 97 yards for the game-winning touchdown. Just sitting and waiting his time behind Joe Burrow, behind Jaden Daniels, he has matured. Is a rarity, to say the least, in college football for a quarterback to sit and wait, a highly recruited quarterback to sit and wait his turn. The defense is going to be, it can't be worse than it was last year, but it's got a ways to go. So Brian Kelly, it's taken him 2 years to correct his staff. Not only did he bring in Baker, but he brought in Corey Raymond and Bo Davis. And those guys are killers in recruiting. They're projected to have a top 3 class now, but they don't have those guys yet on that defensive side. So it's bombs away again at LSU for a track meet. Oh, and Lincoln Riley in USC, when has it not been bombs away on that side? So flag football, you would say what you want. Big 12 back in the day. This LSU roster has a ways to go, and they'll get there. And if they do, we know Brian Kelly can coach a roster. But recruiting on his own, no, he needed some help, and he corrected that. So I am bombs away, points galore in this one, over 63 in this game in Las Vegas. First time ever that the LSU Tigers are playing in Las Vegas. Miami and Florida. Here's the thing. Notre Dame, are they that good, or do we expect them to have a really good record against a weak schedule? Is Florida that bad, or do we really expect them to have a bad record against the toughest schedule in all of college football? What makes it tough is playing teams like Miami, Central Florida, and Florida State in the era of the rent-a-win for major college conference teams. Miami's 3-54 on the road here, Paul, in the Swamp.
Yeah, obviously a really big game for both programs right off the bat, and both head coaches for that matter. Miami's Mario Cristobal obviously needs a win to silence as many critics, for one, and there are quite a few. And he also, more importantly, needs to get the Hurricanes started on the right foot. And I'm drinking the Kool-Aid with Miami. I think this is a team that's going to make the college football playoff. I think they're going to win the ACC. You've got Florida head coach Billy Napier. Meanwhile, he enters the season firmly planted on one of college football's hottest seats. He faces what virtually everyone, as you pointed out, considers the toughest schedule in all of college football. You look at that schedule, and other than next week's home game against FCS Samford, and then a few weeks later, a late September trip to Starkville to play Mississippi State, there just aren't any games that look like automatic wins. And the latter might not even be that. It is the first year for Jeff Lebby there in Mississippi State. Not very high expectations, but Florida just doesn't have many gimmies. You look at this Miami team, they brought in some quality reinforcements through the transfer portal. Most notably, quarterback Cam Ward comes from Washington State. Got one of the best running backs in all of college football, Damian Martinez from Oregon State. A lot of guys on defense. I'm not sure anyone really outdid the Hurricanes in the portal. Florida, meanwhile, arguably they lost their top offensive player, top defensive player in the portal to rival SEC programs. But I think this line's spot on. Really interesting game to watch, and I've got to lean to the Canes, but I'll be just watching this one as an interested observer.
Well, this is one of my picks, and I like Florida here, and the home points in the Swamp. And the schedule is it's almost impossible for Florida to have a winning season this year. Okay, but because how many gimmies? They got one, Samford, and that's it. Every other game, there's no gimmies, and going to be underdog in as many as 10. So this is unbelievable to where it was once the best job in all of college football. Their financial support, their budget has fallen behind a little bit. But to be the only SEC program in a state that produces the most NFL talent, you got a pretty damn good recruiting advantage. But teams like Miami are outspending them right now. But where is this positioned, okay, before they take the wear and tear of that schedule right now? So they're going to be as good as they can be early in the schedule. The other thing is, we learned last week, Haynes King, you made a break point. There was more in place for less of a transition bump for Georgia Tech than Florida State. Well, Graham Mertz, we've seen first-year quarterbacks, make a big jump in their second year as a transfer. Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow, just to name just a couple from LSU. But Mertz, surprised, I was floored how good he was last year. This is a conference that had Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner last year, and this year in Carson Beck, who may be the number one pick in the draft this year. His completion percentage and TD to interception ratio was near the top of the league, and that's in year one, so he's in place to make that jump. Man, still, call me, prove it to me first. Let me see what Cristobal can do before he doesn't botch one up. Gators, if they're playing in week 9, no, I'm on Miami. But week 1 in the Swamp, before they turn on Sunbelt Billy, give me the Gators at home in the points plus the 3. And then the final one of the night of the opening weekend and the first full weekend, and that is rekindling, just like Penn State and West Virginia, rekindling an old rivalry. Georgia and Clemson are as well. 13.5 and 49 against Clemson. We talk about roster building. Well, Dabo Swinney has been heavily criticized because he is not. He just turned his nose up to the transfer portal. Klubnik came on at the end of the season. Clemson won their last 5, but we know Georgia as talented as anybody in the country and the preseason number 1. Paul, 13.5 and 49.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I like this showdown in Atlanta on Saturday to go under the total of 49, Jimmy. First of all, and I've got a lot of statistical data to support my position. You look at Clemson's offense. Back in 2018, they averaged 6.6 yards per carry, and that's when they were rolling, obviously, but 6.6 yards per carry. Then the next year in 2019, they averaged 6.4 yards per carry. The last 4 seasons, they have averaged 4.6 yards per carry or less. So they're averaging a full 2 yards per carry less the last 4 seasons than those 2 seasons when they were still kind of hitting all cylinders. Now they lose their all-purpose running back, Will Shipley. He was drafted in the 4th round of last April's draft. He was clearly their top playmaker. He was the guy who contributed in the running game, in the passing game, in the return game. He was a jack of all trades. Finished his career there at Clemson with more than 2,700 yards rushing, with more than 600 yards receiving, and more than 900 yards in the return game. And now they just really don't have any clear-cut playmakers there on Clemson's offense. You just don't see any field stretchers, big hitters that can go the distance. And I found this next gem really interesting. Clemson, they threw the ball deep, which in this statistical measure was defined as beyond 20 yards. They threw the ball deep, just 7.8% of last year's pass attempts. That was the lowest rate of all 133 FBS teams. So they don't throw the ball downfield. In relation to that stat, Clemson only had 46 plays of 20 yards or more, so had plays of an average of 20 yards or more, just 3.5 such plays per game, and that's really low. Last time I checked, Georgia's pretty good on defense. You've seen those videos, Kirby getting them hyped up before the game. I'll leave out some of the adjectives, but he likes to eat. And I think he's going to want to eat against Clemson on Saturday. Cade Klubnik, I just don't see this team. How are they going to – they're going to need to get 17 points probably to go over, more than 17 points to get this game over against some angry dogs. And I just don't see that. And meanwhile, you look at Georgia, and they're not the same team offensively either. Carson Beck, one of the top front runners for the Heisman Trophy, but he loses a generational tight end in Brock Myers, who not only was a big-time threat in the passing game, but heck, he could run the ball, he could do about anything. And then you got that gritty wide receiver, Ladd McConkey. He was a second-round pick. So now you lose your best 2 receivers. Trevor Etienne, he may or may not play against Clemson. Smart's not showing his hand on that, whether or not he'll be disciplined for a alcohol-related, I believe it was, arrest earlier this year. But in any event, points are going to be at a premium, I think. I think it's going to go under that total of 49. I like the under in Clemson and Georgia.
And I definitely like your reason, Paul, and I'll add to that, and that is the first game of the season where the offenses to have a few kinks to work out. There's no doubt about that. And, yeah, Beck said that's a nice safety valve to have. I mean, when things got sticky, and their schedule was a joke last year, and the league stepped in. They canceled their Oklahoma game because Oklahoma was joining the league the following year. So their one tough non-conference game, they put in a rent-a-win instead, which made a light schedule that much lighter. But when it got sticky in the plains, at Auburn, he found Bowers. What a nice safety valve to have, a comfort blanket for him the whole time. And there's nobody's been better in defense the last few years because they've recruited the best. Look, college football, baby, defense is 90% players, and no, they've got it. So we'll see. Klubnik in his second, he should expand, but how much? I didn't know. The last of there's a lot of Division I teams to be dead last in, yards per attempt, or I'm sorry, just attempt yardage. That's strong. I'm due favor a lean to Clemson for the same reason. First game. If it was 3-4 games in, I'd have a little bit more, and we'd have to see if Georgia would be a little bit more explosive. But both of these teams, I think, scoring is going to be lower with the first game, and also, so unders and the points. So you've got the under, which I like as well, but the plus 13.5 is my lean on that game as well. Each and every week, we do anywhere from the top, 4 or 5 high-profile games, the most traffic, the ones we know you want to watch and have some money on it as well. Then later in the week, we're going to do our best bets for you, which is the rest of the schedule. Each and every week right here. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott, the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.